Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Maxi here, and I am from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos here. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll present to you our next 2D Mario Let's Play. And this time we're going on to the Famicom Disk System, which appears to be the add-on for the Famicom. Well, it only exists in Japan anyway, so because of that, we are tackling through... Oh no, we've met again with the forms of the Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, except now we are tackling through the game on the original hardware, specifically the Famicom Disk System. So because of that, I was expecting to able to actually jump right into the forms of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, but unfortunately though, like we said this so many times already, we have to wait until specifically until 2024 is approaching. So because of that, for the time being, we're about to be tackling through yet another difficult games in terms of the forms of certain franchises. Now I know what you're thinking, is Silver supposed to be able to actually go back onto Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link? Well, as it turns out is that unfortunately though, that particular continuous part for Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link has been delayed until specifically next Saturday, specifically 9th of December. So because of that, I'll explain more details about that once we get this game started on the original format, or specifically the original hardware, specifically the Famicom Disk System. So anyway, so let's jump right into Super Mario Bros. 2 The Lost Levels. Now, yeah, relatively speaking though, for those of you probably wondering, technically we've already did this game thanks to the forms of the Super Mario All-Stars version of the game. Thanks to both Mighty and Ray, have both already tackled for that during the course of the forms of March in 2023. So I figure, much like the forms of how it does it on Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 2, and Super Mario Bros. 3, I feel like I'm about to show you guys the forms of the original version of the game. So just in case, for the sake of clarity, to able to actually mention about quite a few differences between the forms of the Super Mario All-Stars version compared to the original counterparts. I mean, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that if you couldn't tell already, when you managed able to first time boot up the game, if you couldn't tell, that we actually have a choice between the forms of both, you know, a Mario game or Luigi game. So, as you can tell, I'm going to be playing as Luigi for this run, much like the forms of how it does it on the Super Mario All-Stars version, clearly because, well, I'm sure that if you probably already know what to expect. So, anyway, so yeah, a few things I want to explain for this point today is that today's date, of course, is the 2nd of December today, in some cases in 2023 today. And you already know for the fact that recently that Jewel, she's now working on the next Metroid Let's Play, which appears to be Metroid Zero Mission, which appears to be a complete remake of the first game back on the NES, but with some new additions, as well as some quite a lot of improvements over the likes of the original version of the game. At least she already explained more about it during the course of the forms of Metroid Zero Mission, potentially. So, and if you couldn't tell already, yes, I'm doing exactly the same one-up trick, which is only going to be a thing during the course of World 1-1. So, yeah, I think I should be going to be perfectly fine for able to actually get that infinite one-up trick done and over with. So, let's get the adventure started, for the sake of the forms of, you know what I'm saying, with Super Mario Bros. 2, The Lost Levels for the Famicom Disk System. So, of course, this game did originally came out in 1986, a year after the first game has been released, during the course of the forms of the NES or Famicom. So as a result, the reason why this game has only been existence in Japan, this is most notably because it was originally going to be able to be released around the world, but Nintendo of America, including the European version, ultimately cancelled this game, get this game to be released during the course of the North America as well as Europe, at least specifically the original version, because this game is Super Mario Bros. On steroids. To be more specifically, this is basically, it's like the hard version of the original Super Mario Bros. So, like, obviously the gameplay itself is pretty much exactly the same as the forms within the first Super Mario Bros. Game, although the noticeable differences this time around though is that there are quite a number of differences as far as you can definitely tell right from the start. Is that, well, as I mentioned this before, is that when you boot up the title screen, which is very similar to the first Super Mario Bros., only this time around though it actually has a jumping Koopa Troopa, we even start the game off, there was actually one enemy on screen. And you do realize it's about the fact that rather than having multiplayer in this game this time around, so instead you're able to actually come across into a Mario game and Luigi game. The differences between all these attributes. I mean, think about it. Mario plays exactly like the forms of how it does on the first game, and if you couldn't tell, since I'm going to be playing as Luigi for the majority of the playthrough, because, well, in addition about the fact that he plays a little bit differently than the forms of how it does it for Mario, because for one thing, he jumps a lot more higher, and second of all, he does have some bit of traction, so because of that, if you want to make the game even more challenging, you gotta play the game as Luigi. So because of that, now as far as the entire structure of this particular Let's Play as far as I'm concerned, similar to the forms of how it does on the Super Mario All-Stars version of the game, specifically, you know what I'm saying with the lost levels in particular, I'm obviously going to be going through every single levels in the game, but here's a massive differences between this version of the game compared to the Super Mario All-Stars version, because I can see why a lot of people seem to say that the Super Mario All-Stars version is more superior, mainly because of the forms of the save feature, and on top of that, if you dare get a game over, you can able to actually restart the entire level again, rather than just the forms of the entire world all over again, so... But I'll explain more about it until whenever we continue proceedings for this game, basically. So because of that, yeah, not much else has been going on, I'm afraid, apart from the fact that Sonic has already mentioned about quite a number of things, thanks to the forms of the final ND World presentation that's already been a thing during the course of the forms of the majority of November. So yeah, it's pretty insane about the fact that I can't even believe by saying this, we're about to be getting ourselves the entire Shantae game lineup for the Nintendo Switch platform. So that's pretty fantastic, all things considered, especially now we've actually got the lost game has been restored. So even then though, I am still pretty much pumped for it, especially concerning for the fact that exponentially, by that time once that particular game is going to come out, specifically Shantae Advance Risky Revolution or something like that, the subtitle for the game, basically though, we can pretty much guarantee we can able to tackle through the majority of the Shantae games in the future. Well, it all really depends really, just because obviously we are still expecting to able to be, hopefully, trying to able to play Super Mario Bros. Wonder once we get around to it, as well as the forms of the other WarioWare games. Well, there are a couple of exceptions, mind you, which are WarioWare Snapped, as well as WarioWare DIY, mainly because I haven't touched that particular game since. Like, in the past few months, I just somehow managed to complete the past WarioWare games, including Get It Together, Gold, as well as recently Move It, quite a number of times, so I can able to actually just enjoy the microgame selections and all that stuff. And thus, it does have a plot to it, unlike the forms of how it does it on WarioWare Snapped, and especially noticeable with DIY, there is no story involved. So because of that though, I understand about the forms of the specific genre they managed able to cooperate with it, but it's just about the fact no matter what though, it's just, well, I'm sure that Sonic, he's already explained about that, also during the forms of in Sonic Frontiers as well, so... And relatively speaking though, it's about the fact I believe Sonic is almost getting very close towards the end of Sonic Frontiers completely, until he deserves the actual break for able to actually just to play through the entire, well, Sonic Frontiers experience. Especially, let me tell you, it's almost gonna be likely also that, well, at this point in time, we're now on 50 parts so far for Sonic Frontiers. So as a result, what is this, like a similar situation as the forms of Super Mario Odyssey back in during the forms of in 2019 and stuff like that? I mean, it's insane, you know? However, unlike the forms of how it does it on Super Mario Odyssey, where, you know what I'm saying about the fact that we actually did manage to went through several recording segments during the course of in 2018 and the majority of the time in 2019, so even then though, because it was expecting for a massive gap for that particular playthrough in mind, whilst thankfully in Sonic Frontiers, it's most likely going to take place in 2023 for sure, so either way. Speaking of which though, I can't even believe by saying this is about the fact that we actually tackle through a lot of games are considerably the most difficult out of the bunch, likely also for its, we've already tackled through, Castlevania games, as well as the forms of, well, I would classify the same, maybe some parts of Sonic Frontiers, and on top of that, with this ridiculous mission completionist for Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, and on top of that, there you know what I'm saying, that Silver, he's almost going to be able to oh yeah, let's talk about the forms of the reason why that Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link continuous parts has been officially delayed, up until now anyway. It's most notably because Silver, he's pretty much not exactly ready to come back into Zelda 2 just yet, especially noticeable because concerning for the fact that he still needs to grind as many of those experience points as much as he can before he decides to able to tackle through the next few temples in the game, or palaces if you're in America. So, but even then though, because chances are, between this, alongside with Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link, and several of Castlevania games, usually including the third entry in the series, usually for the sake of the forms of Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, that those games in particular, well, at least on the NES anyway, are really, really brutally difficult. And don't even get me started on the forms of Ghosts and Goblins on the NES. Like, I've heard horror stories of that game, especially concerning for the fact that it does have a lot of, you know what I'm saying, frustrations from time to time. So yeah, you probably get the idea about that. So of course, since about the fact that we are going to be playing through Super Mario Bros. 2, or should I say Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels for the actual proper title for it, so as you can tell, it's about the fact that the actual graphics in this game does have some slight changes. Like for instance, compared to the forms of in the first Super Mario Bros. Game, that basically though is about the fact that we can able to walk on the forms of the actual blocks or something like that, or anything else for that particular point's worth noting for, I guess. Mind you, it's been a very, very, very long while since we actually tackled something related to Mario, since in Journey forms of Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3, so because of that, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that you still need to rely on the forms of stiff controls at one point, even when it comes to likely jumping in midair and all that stuff. And again, since I'm going to be playing as Luigi for the majority of this playthrough in mind, that also means about the fact that we're still in 2023, so expecting to believe about the fact that I'm still celebrating the 40th anniversary of Luigi, and in some cases the year of Luigi, despite the fact that, well, Nintendo never seemed able to bring out several projects for the year of Luigi for this year this time around, so mainly because they don't want to make the exactly the same mistake as the forms of how it does it in 2013 if I recall, but either way though, beggars yourselves can be choosers I guess, so. And obviously, if you couldn't tell already, the major differences between the forms of this game compared to the first game is, of course, the difficulty. Like, my god, the level design in this game is just all over the place. Unlike the forms of how it does in the first game, that it's pretty self-explanatory when you get the hang of it though. But no matter what though, it's about the fact that in this game in particular, the Lost Levels, is filled to the brim with a lot of cheap enemy placements, and on top of that, several of new gimmicks they were able to actually add it in, that was actually introduced in this game, which as a result, yeah, I just got nothing else to say about the forms of this game in particular, besides, what the heck just happened right there? I clipped for that little wall! Oh man, that's quite something else entirely. So, although one thing I do really appreciate about the forms of this game in particular is that it does have some interesting details, like for instance, we're actually going to be walking on dirt instead of the forms of the block, and on top of that, those clouds up there now actually has a mouth and some eyes as well. And not only that, there's also the forms of how the fact that they did manage to change a font slightly to make it a little bit more of a, well, there's actually a shadow for that particular font to make it easier to able to read some of these text and read. And believe it or not though, those mushrooms do now actually have eyes. So as a result, that was before when the future games did manage to able to continue that tradition, for able to actually bring, you know, mushrooms for the sake of eyes, for its visual identity for the sake of the forms of the power-ups and all that stuff. So of course, if you probably couldn't tell already, that we're actually going to be ignoring several hazards in this game. Specifically, every once in a while that we will come across into the forms of the introduction to the poison mushroom, which it behaves exactly like touching enemies, so yeah, don't touch them. And of course, the power-ups in this game makes a return from the likes of in the first game. Like, for instance, there's the mushroom and the fire flower, even though getting the fire flower is just way too rare in this game, mainly because you're about to get hit a lot. And there might be a couple of times though that you might come across into the forms of several, well, puzzle levels as far as I'm concerned. But for the most part though, since that we've already experienced this, again, ever since in the Super Mario All-Stars version of the game. However, there's one little key factor I just want to able to touch upon something, is that since that, like I said before, I'm gonna able to try my best to complete the entire playthrough. As a result, we're still gonna go through worlds 1 through 9 on the first playthrough. But, here's the catch to this though, unlike in Super Mario All-Stars version of Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, is that, well, if you really want to get actually access to other special worlds, ranging from World A through D, in the Super Mario All-Stars version, you only have to beat the game once, bam, it transports you to World A. In the original version, as you can tell, you need to beat the game 8 times in a row until you're excessive. What stupid, requirement is that? And it also doesn't help about the fact that in order able to actually get one of those requirements is that, I believe, straight to the point, you can't afford to able to use the warp zones. And by the way, warp zones do make a return in this game. However, some of them can either help you, whilst other times it will hinder your progress. Especially concerning for the fact that there was that one particular level, if you couldn't tell, from the likes of in World 3-1, there is this very punishing warp zone where if you accidentally come across into that warp zone on that level, basically though, it takes you straight back into the beginning of the game. So because of that, gee, no wonder why a lot of people seem to really despise the difficulty spike during the course of this game in particular, which as a result, yeah, I can see why a lot of people really prefers playing this game on the Super Nintendo version, specifically the Super Mario All-Stars version, just because, well, obviously you do able to actually access to a save feature, and on top of that, about the fact that if you dare get a game over, like I said before, you're able to actually try that particular level again. Likely, for example, if you get a game over during the course of in World 8-4, if you get a game over, thankfully you don't have to go all the way back to the beginning of the world you died in, so instead you can able to actually continue where you left off, or something like that. Whilst in here though, if you get a game over, let's just say at some point in World 8, basically though you have to start all over at the beginning of the world you died in. Which, thankfully, is much more forgiving than the likes of in the first Super Mario Bros. Because if you run out of lives in that game, or if you get a game over in that game, you send all the way back to the beginning of the game with no continues. If Lost Levels plays like that, then this game will be pretty much unplayable. So because of that, I can see why, no matter what though, is that unlike in the, the Game Boy Color version of the game, specifically the ones I was talking about is the Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, where basically, if you manage to able to unlock Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels as one of those separate unlockable modes, as far as I'm concerned, it usually changes the name to Super Mario Bros. For Super Players. So, yeah, I can totally see why about the fact that this game is honestly for Super Players only, so. And there might be occasional leaps of faith, so because of that though, yeah, this is a good example of why I'm actually going to be selecting Luigi for the majority of this playthrough alone. Mainly because the higher jumps you're going to be able to expect to utilize with is going to be pretty dang handy, especially noticeable when it gets to the point until the final few stages in the game. Well, I would classify for saying about the fact that for those of you ever able to actually access to the Nintendo Switch online subscription services nowadays, basically though, good luck for able to actually experience this game, because thankfully though, you can able to actually activate some save states if you're having a lot of frustration for certain levels from time to time, even especially noticeable if you come across into those very, very unexpected, well, enemy placements, as far as you can definitely tell. And also if you're having several struggles with the forms of some puzzle-like levels, like these for instance, that again, if you managed able to actually accidentally choose the wrong path, basically though you have to start all the way back to that particular beginning portion of that particular puzzle. I mean, it's just outrageous, you know. This game is just pretty much outrageous. I mean, sure, it looks like Mario, and it plays like Mario, but the level design is just not Mario, because it's almost like, before when they decided able to make a Kaizo level designs or something like that, or even especially noticeable, that was before when ROM hacks managed able to make certain, creative level design at some form or another. But either way though, this game was first came out in 1986, which is roughly the same year as when not only The Legend of Zelda first came out for the likes of not only on the NES, but also on the Famicom Disk System as well. And there goes my first death right there. Well, actually, kind of thinking about it, I think technically we've already come across into the first death in the very beginning of the game already. Just in case I was able to double check if I somehow succeed my infinite 1-up trick. So because of that, yeah, I always attempt able to do that particular technique ever since entering the forms of New Super Mario Bros. 2 for the 3DS. And I'm pretty sure it's possible that you can able to actually get the infinite 1-up trick for the likes of Super Mario Bros. Wonder as well. Although, relatively speaking though, it's about the fact that, again, we'll pretty much have to save that particular topic once we do get around onto... Oh no, we have ourselves this very annoying gimmick right there, which appears to be the wind. So, oh boy, with some very stiff controls like this, and also in trying to able to incorporate with the wind, that's gonna be quite of a challenge. But I digress. So, also, I just want to classify for mentioning about this as well, only 23 more days to go until Christmas is approaching. So because of that, obviously if you couldn't tell already, it's about the fact that we've already set up the actual usual Christmas tree and some Christmas decorations here and there as well. So everything else will be pretty much accounted for the sake of time. So, no! Oh, wait a minute, we have to deal with those invisible blocks. So that's just terrific. But regardless of such though, I pretty much know exactly what to expect, but then again no. Several of levels in this game does feel a bit kind of stingy sometimes when it comes to checkpoint placements, but apart from those side things though, after all, we actually got the ridiculous amount of extra lives at this point, so we don't need to necessarily have to worry about getting a game over or anything else like that until... Well, let's just say, at this point in time, when it gets to the point during at some point in Christmas Eve, sometime in Christmas Eve, I'm also able to actually classify for able to mentioning about this right from the start, is that, well, as soon as we're able to actually completely done with the forms of worlds 1 through 9, obviously I will be able to actually play through the game 7 more times off screen, by the way, and as a result that should able to actually give me a benefit for the doubt when it comes to able to actually access to the final 4 worlds in the game, which is obviously World A all the way up to World D, and oh boy, am I able to come across into a lot of game overs at this point. Well, exponentially speaking, not so much for the main worlds, luckily, because like I said before, I did somehow manage to able to pull off this awesome, dang it, I was so close. I accidentally fall off from the hole by mistake, but, oh well, I suppose no big deal, because we technically got the checkpoint, so... Oh yeah, of course, we have to watch out for those red piranha plants, which they are a little bit more aggressive, so... Oh boy. This game certainly feels quite of a challenge compared to the first game as a result, so... Even though we've already done the first Super Mario Bros., not just by the forms within the NES version back in last year in 2022, but also during the forms within the Super Nintendo version from the Super Mario All-Stars version, on the likes of the forms event this year in March. So, what I thought was a little bit interesting is that the Super Mario Bros. The original has never saw a light of the release of the likes of the Game Boy Advance remake, which, as a result, that there was actually a fan-made game out there who were able to recreate, let's just say, Super Mario Advance 5, Super Mario Bros., which I thought was quite interesting, but as a result, it's not completely done. Although, What I've noticed is about the fact that the actual sprite is actually heavily based off from Super Mario All-Stars version as we expect. However though, I can see why for the fact that the original Super Mario Bros. Has never gave ourselves the Super Mario Advance treatment, because as a result, technically, that we will able to notice that yes, there is actually the GBA version of Super Mario Bros. After all, which plays exactly like defaults of how it does in the original NES counterpart. In addition to that though, there is also the Game Boy Color version known as Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. So yeah, not much explanations for the sake of time, because if you can't tell already, I have to concentrate so hard in this game. So because of that, so yeah, it looks like we're not doing too shabby for the most part, despite I did die quite a few times, but that's what's to be expected when it comes to the difficulty in this game is going to get ramped up a lot, even especially noticeable after World 5, I believe, that basically though we will come across into some of these nerve-wracking level designs, and on top of that, by that time, once we get to the point into any forms of in World 6 Castle, or anything else like that, Bowser will decide able to keep on tossing the hammers at us, so oh boy. Again, wish me luck I suppose, because I really gonna need it, so because seriously, it's been like Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link all over again, except, well, at least this game is gonna be quite short, as long as you need to replay the game several times, which, yeah, it's pretty insane, you know. So with that said, I think we should probably end things up at this point right here, so join me next time for more of Let's Play of Super Mario Bros. 2, or Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, as that we'll move on to World 6, all the way up to World 9. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later, fellas.